Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. Apologies for yesterday, but I had an away day from my desk in Karen at the Hemingway's Hotel, which is rather wonderful. Safaricom held this sustainability-related forum. It was really very, very good. Lots of good people there that I caught up with. And the chief guest was a gentleman called Nick Gowing, who I remember reading the news, I think for both the BBC and via TV. He said many very interesting things, and I'll just give you a selection of them. 2030 is not 14 years away, it's 8 hours away. That's the speed with which we are moving. And you know, I've been talking about Barrow, who was a great philosopher of this concept of speed. Speed now illuminates reality, whereas light once gave objects of the world their shape. That's Paul Barrow. Returning to Nick Gowing, he's quoted Ignatieff, who said, "This is the end of normal." And then another quotation, the rate of change we are going through at the moment is comparable to what happens in wartime. So speed, clear component of this new normal. Macro thoughts, I go back to the 12th of September when I said my second trade of the year is to buy put options on 10-year bonds because this is going to pop. And when it pops, the wizardry won't work anymore. And at that moment, there is going to be one heck of a move. And Bloomberg tweeted this morning, forget Brexit, forget Trump, this was the biggest market event of the year. I quoted Hotel California, mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice, and she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. I said, then what is clear is that we're at the fag end of this part. 1 month US Treasury yields closed at an 8-year high, 39 basis points, bond market preparing for the second Fed rate hike. Have a look at this China GDP profile. I think it's looking far steadier than it actually is. In fact, you know, high frequency data is signaling it's about half what's being said it is. Home thoughts, John Glenn. As I hurtled through space, one thought kept crossing my mind. Every part of this rocket was supplied by the lowest bidder. Have a look at this photograph I took a while back of the giraffes and the Savo. The giraffe population has fallen from about 157,000 in 1985 to 97,500 today, a drop of almost 40%. And then another photograph of a giraffe who apparently lost his tail to a hungry hyena. That was earlier this year in Mara, Fairmont. We attended the Santa Lucia evening at the Swedish Embassy, and I'd like to thank His Excellency Johan Borgström for that invitation. St. Lucy's Day is what we were celebrating last night in Nairobi. Also called the Feast of St. Lucy, is a Christian feast day celebrated on the 13th of December in Advent, commemorating St. Lucy, a 3rd century martyr under the Diocletianic persecution, who, according to legend, brought food and aid to Christians hiding in the catacombs, using a candlelit wreath to light a way and leave her hands free to carry as much food as possible. Her feast once coincided with the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year before calendar reform, so her feast day has become a festival of light. Falling within the Advent season, St. Lucy's Day is viewed as an event signalling the arrival of Christmastide, pointing to the arrival of the light of Christ on the calendar on Christmas Day. And apparently it's a merging of that with pre-Christian mythology. It was the darkest, longest night of the year. And the prayers, the pagan prayers were there because it was seen as the turning point in the year. The days would get longer and life would return. Have a look at this video I took. It was a very grand affair, a huge choir from the Swedish school, and do take a look. His Excellency Johann Borgstam said that light in the end always conquers darkness, and he's quite correct. Behind every word a whole world is hidden that must be imagined. Heinrich Böll. Political reflections. If they want war, we'll give them war, said Bright Jones, a 33-year-old opposition supporter. This is in Ghana. We have won and they want to cheat, he said, alleging the Electoral Commission was deliberately delaying an announcement. Mr. Akufo-Addo said, we are quietly confident that we have won a famous and historic victory. It's done, changes here, Ghana decides, was a tweet I read earlier this morning. Enjoy 99.7 FM, just call the elections in favour of the opposition candidate and look at the difference. It was quite a compelling win. My conclusions are that Buhari, Barrow and now Akufo-Addo are signalling a trend change. Although widely believed to have consulted fortune tellers, President Yahya Jammeh surely foresaw little chance of an upset in the elections in Gambia. On December the 1st, Mr. Barrow pulled off a big political upset in results announced on December the 2nd, winning by 45.5% to Mr. Jammeh's 36.7%. Even more surprisingly, to his great credit, Mr. Jammeh quickly conceded defeat. And really, you've got to go back one more election to Buhari's really to get a sense of the dynamic. And it seems to be an inflection point, particularly in West Africa, but obviously you've got big elephants in the room like the DRC. The decision to liberate all of Syria is taken and Aleppo is part of it, Assad said. The Reconciliation Minister Ali Haidar told reporters in Damascus, those who believed in the Syrian triumph know that the rebels' morale is at its lowest and that these collapses that have begun are like domino tiles, he said. Russia wants to move the rebels to Idlib. The fighters have a choice, survive for an extra couple of weeks by going to Idlib or fight to the very end and die in Aleppo. For the Russians, it's simple, place them all in Idlib and then have all their rotten eggs in one basket. On Sunday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov delivered an ultimatum to the remaining militants. Those groups which refuse to leave eastern Aleppo will be treated as terrorists. By refusing to walk out from eastern Aleppo, they will in fact go ahead with armed struggle. We will treat them accordingly as terrorists and extremists and support the Syrian army in its operation against such armed gangs. It appears that the Battle of Aleppo is about to end and the Syrian army is on the verge of total victory. You know, I don't think anything is black and white, but in this regard, President Assad was pluralist, Christians, Ismailis, all kinds, lived happily in Syria in a mosaic of many different cultures, and I think the rebels, largely foreign and mercenaries, did not have right on their side at all. And I think at the end of the day, we're far better off with Assad sitting there than the crazies. Put up a photograph of Christmas in Syria and the historical Grand Umayyad Mosque of Aleppo that was destroyed by the terrorists. Nick Gowing was saying in his presentation a real fear in Germany that Merkel just does not get it. And that goes back to the comment I made over the weekend. At this moment, President Putin has Fortress Europe surrounded and nuclear bombs in Kaliningrad. Very disturbed that Trump did not put generals in charge of education, environment and housing. What kind of junta is this? Asked Jeremy Scale. Sri Lanka is to sell an 80% stake in a strategically placed harbour to the Chinese. A deep water port on the nation's southern coast, close to one of the world's busiest sea lanes, to a Chinese state-owned company, senior officials said. Under the deal, a copy of which was reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, China Merchants Port Holdings Company would pay about $1.1 billion for its share of the port and adjoining land in Hambantota district. Washington could react warily, depending on the details. The port in Hambantota lies along an important trade route linking the Middle East and Asia, and China's Navy have been stepping up its operations in the Indian Ocean coast as it seeks to project power westward. We will watch carefully, said a senior US official. On the other side of India, near the mouth of the Persian Gulf, a port in Gwadar, Pakistan, has already been built by China, which is a cornerstone of the $46 billion investment in Chinese investments in transport and power generation in that country. China has made a giant stride in projecting power westwards and escaping the pivot to Asian noose with the port of Gwadar, and this is another big stride. Go back to the piece I wrote on the 2nd of December 2013 about the pivot to Asia. You know, it really was, I think, about the encirclement of China, shrinking of its operating theatre, and I said then lighting the tinderbox that is the periphery. And I said the US probably feels it holds a decisive hard power advantage at this moment, and given that the trajectory is one of gradual erosion of that decisive advantage, leads me to the view that this pivot of Asia has a logic and momentum of its own. At that time, I saw the US being increasingly determined to press its advantage. One of the key elements of the pivot to Asia is the air-sea battle concept. This concept envisaged the battle beginning with a blinding attack against Chinese anti-access facilities and incorporates distant blockade operations. China's dependence on foreign oil is increasing, just as the US's dependency is decreasing. And interestingly, given my belief that the Eastern Seaboard is a fabulous energy prize, Eastern Seaboard of Africa, puts the Indian Ocean in many respects right into the geopolitical frame. If you are considering distant blockade operations, which was the practical component of the pivot to Asia, one of those areas you'll be blockading is this part of the world, given the amount of energy that is likely to be sold into Asia in the future. So this is another choke point that they're breaking out of. And I was, in August 2016, I was talking about how you've got to see the Indian Ocean as an appendage of the South China Sea. I remind you of what Shinzo Abe said at TICAD. Japan bears the responsibility of fostering the confluence of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. So in his mind, I'll put up a photograph of Ali the Navigator, who navigated us to Asini Island. And the overall point I'm making is Gwadar and this port in Sri Lanka represent bursting of that pivot encirclement. German Bundeswehr is to train Saudi army officers. My piece was, over the weekend, was the parabolic rebound of Vladimir Putin. And my conclusion was I had no doubt that Putin ran a seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference, which amplified the Trump candidacy. Let's move on to the markets. Major US stock indices closed at an all-time high for the second day in a row. This is Trumponomics for you. Call volume on S&P 500 contracts surged to a record high on Wednesday, which is a historically bullish signal. The VIX, the Wall Street so-called fear index, is 11.92. It's really been lower over the past quarter century. The Draghi, of course, caught the market by surprise, insists his ECB trim is different from a taper. The euro, meanwhile, is at 106.26, dropped as low as 105.92. There's a triple bottom around 105. That breaks going straight down to parity. Remember, it touched a 1 month peak of 1.0875 on Thursday. Dollar index 101.18, Japanese yen 114.40. 10-month high was 114.83, set last week. Swissy 101.62, the pound 125.81. I'm getting more bullish about the pound. Well, I've always been bullish. I was bullish when we were down there. Aussie 0.7469, India rupee 67.595, South Korean won 1167.54. They've just impeached the president there, and that's probably a bullish sign, I would have thought, particularly if the UN Secretary General is put forward as a candidate. Brazilian real 337.59, Egyptian pound back over 18.093. And the South African rand, about which Deutsche Bank have turned bullish, 13.6683. I'll put up a longer term chart of the dollar index. My target is 110. It rose overnight nearly 1%. Widening of US-Japan interest rate differentials is also supporting the dollar, with the US 10-year yield rising to 2.445%. Euro was sharply lower after Draghi's press conference. Euro dollar, let me put up a longer term chart, and you'll see that we're currently at 106.22. Aurelia has been calling the bottom in the euro, and so far she's done well with that call. Take a look at her chart, which is a little bit outdated, but it gives you an idea of the levels that she was looking at. Russia has sold an $11 billion stake in Rosneft to Glencore and Qatar. Glencore plc and Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund agreed to buy a 10.2 billion euro stake in Russia's largest oil producer from the state in a triumph for President Putin over sanctions imposed by the West. Surprise deal gives the buyers a 19.5% stake in Rosneft PJSC. Cole Tusker tweeted me, "So Putin is selling off state jewels." I responded, "Well, I think it's a signal that he's not boxed in." Glencore deal-making king Ivan Glasenberg returns with his wager on oil. Javier posted that photograph. Crude oil, let me check last, is up this morning, trading at $51.71. Remember my very big, bold call that it's not going to go above 60. Iron ore's fight back has propelled the commodity to the highest level in more than 2 years, with prices topping $80 a metric ton. Gold 1168.11, the bias remains down. Interesting piece in Reuters how Gambia's top brass turned on long-ruling Jammeh. According to political and security sources, the morning after voting, but before the Independent Electoral Commission announced the results, the heads of the Army, Police, and National Intelligence Agency met Jammeh at his office. He was advised by them that he should be ready to officially concede defeat. After the meeting, he told his ministers, "You will be jobless in January." "I will be a farmer," he said. His long official title, His Excellency Sheikh Professor Dr. Al-Hajj Yahya A.J.J. Jammeh Babili Mansa, stretching across the width of the screen. It is a big deal, it really is. An interesting piece in The Intercept via Le Monde, extensive British spying throughout Africa revealed. Top secret British surveillance operations targeted the director of the WTO, several multinational corporations, a top French businessman, and heads of state across Africa, according to a new series of reports by Le Monde. Whoever thinks it's not the case, it's quite interesting. President Kibaki, his strategic advisors, Omari Yaradua, private secretary, Ghana's John Akufo, Sierra Leone's Ernest Karoma, the presidential palace in Luanda, prominent business figures such as Tony Elumelu and Chris Karubi as well. EY's African Business Center leader Michael Lello said Europe emerged as the largest regional investor in Africa, contributing 35.1% of FDI projects and 17.8% of capital investment in the first half of 2016. South African oil shares down 0.3% this year, but has popped its head back above 50,000 with a big 2.16% rally yesterday. Dollar versus rand, it's firmer, and perceptions that it's offering good value at these levels, given that Zuma seems to be somewhat triangulated. Egyptian pound back above 18. I'll put up a 3-month chart. Nigerian oil share down 10.14% this year. Ghana's opposition, we're still waiting for the definitive result, is calling on the president to concede defeat. Ghana's stock exchange composite index is down 22.6% this year. Very interesting piece in The Economist. Across Africa, similar magic is being wrought as phones spur innovation and boost incomes. A study by academics from MIT published this week found that simply by gaining access to M-Pesa, 2% of Kenyan households were lifted out of poverty between 2008 and 2014. The GSMA, an international trade body, argues that for every 10% increase in phone penetration in poor countries, productivity improves by more than 4 percentage points, and that a doubling in mobile data usage increases annual growth in GDP per person by half a percentage point. Yet more may be in store as Africa stands on the cusp of a second mobile phone revolution. Very interesting essay. Very interesting point about Safaricom and M-Pesa. If you didn't get a chance to look at Bob Collimore's Mind Speak, The Evolution of Hope, please take a look, listen to the Q&A, have a look at his slides. Very powerful, big sweep, and effectively exactly about these points that The Economist is making. Kenyan consumers pay an average of 18.7 US cents per kilowatt hour, compared with 9 cents in neighboring Tanzania and 3 cents in Ethiopia. Volkswagen is to sell the locally assembled Polo at below 2 million shillings, below $20,000, eyes the family car buyers. The Volkswagen Polo Vivo will be launched on December the 21st. Kenya shilling last trading at 101.19, Nairobi all shares down 8.24% this year and is at lows last seen on the 22nd of September. NSE 20, which is down 21.29% this year. That difference is really largely all about Safaricom, is also at a similar September low. I like this photograph. I've never been there. Ultraviola, the perfect family winter escape to Kenya at the enchanting Qantas camp. Although I did share a flight once with the wife of the lady who owns the camp. Very charming as well. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Wishing you all a tremendous weekend, and just reminding you that the definition of the modern age today is speed, which now illuminates reality, whereas light once gave objects of their world their shape. Thank you so much for stopping by.